Here is a question worth sitting with before you drift off tonight. Every single night, without exception, you willingly lose consciousness, lie still and mostly helpless for hours, and trust that you'll wake up again. Every animal with a brain does the same thing. And after more than a century of dedicated scientific research, nobody can fully explain why. Not why it feels good, not why it's necessary. Why? On the most basic biological level, evolution decided that every creature with a nervous system needed to switch itself off for a portion of every single day. Tonight, we're going into that mystery together, gently, one quiet fact at a time. Hello, and welcome to Somniora Mind. I'm glad you're here. If these long, slow nights of learning help your own mind settle, consider subscribing or leaving a comment to say hello before you drift away. Here's what we'll explore together tonight. We'll find out why a jellyfish, an animal with no brain at all, still seems to sleep. We'll discover what happens inside your skull in the deepest hours of the night, a private, invisible cleaning process happening in your head right now, whether you're aware of it or not. And near the end of this journey, we'll sit with the strangest sleep of all, the kind astronauts experience while floating, weightless, tethered to the wall of a station orbiting far above the Earth. Here's a fact to open with. If you live to be 90 years old, you will have spent roughly 30 of those years asleep. 3 full decades, gone into the soft, quiet dark. More time than you'll spend on almost anything else you'll ever do. And yet none of it is wasted. Let's find out exactly what all that time is actually for. Sleep might be the most mysterious biological process we still haven't cracked. Despite generations of careful, patient research, sleep remains one of science's most enduring puzzles. We know, beyond any doubt, that it's essential. We know that going without it for too long can genuinely kill you. What we don't fully know is why. Why should any organism willingly lose awareness and become vulnerable for hours out of every single day? Why do brains bother generating dreams at all? Strange and vivid theaters playing out behind closed eyes for no audience but ourselves. Researchers have proposed that sleep conserves energy, that it repairs damaged tissue, that it consolidates memory, that it prunes away unnecessary neural connections built up during the day. All of these theories carry real evidence behind them. None of them, on its own, explains the whole picture. And what makes the mystery even deeper is the sheer diversity of how sleep shows up across the animal kingdom. Some creatures sleep with only half their brain at a time. Some barely sleep at all. Others dream so extravagantly that their bodies twitch and jerk right along with the story unfolding somewhere behind their closed eyes. The fact that evolution has protected and preserved this strange, vulnerable state across billions of years through every environmental pressure imaginable strongly suggests that sleep serves something fundamental, something evolution simply refused to design around. And yet the complete picture continues to slip away from us. Every single night, you surrender to something that is, at once, entirely universal and still, somehow, genuinely unexplained. Let's start with the animals themselves, because their sleep habits are often the strangest clue we have. Every animal with any kind of nervous system appears to need sleep in some form. This isn't simply a human habit, or even a mammalian one. It seems to be woven directly into the fabric of biology itself, present in nearly every creature with neurons to switch off. From insects to elephants, from the smallest visible speck of life to the largest animal that has ever existed, something resembling sleep shows up again and again. That universal presence suggests sleep is genuinely ancient, quite possibly as old as the very first nervous systems that ever evolved. a requirement written into the earliest working instructions of animal life. Watch a tiny fruit fly at rest sometime, its miniature wings folded, its body utterly motionless for stretches at a time, and you're witnessing the exact same fundamental biological cycle currently governing you, right now, tonight. Sleep gives every creature that experiences it a chance to reset, to repair damaged tissue, to clear away cellular waste, and to strengthen whatever memories the day happened to leave behind. The specific shape of sleep varies wildly from species to species. Long, unbroken stretches in some animals, short scattered naps in others, but its sheer, near-universal presence tells us something important. Sleep isn't some optional luxury layered on top of biology. It functions as something closer to a law, every bit as necessary as eating, drinking, or breathing. And here's where the mystery deepens even further. Some jellyfish sleep, even though they have no brain at all to sleep with. This discovery genuinely startled scientists when it first came to light, because it suggests sleep might extend beyond the boundaries of brains entirely. Jellyfish lack anything resembling a centralized nervous system, and yet certain species still slip into a recognizable, sleep-like state. At night, their rhythmic pulsing slows down considerably. They tend to drift closer to the seafloor, and they become noticeably less responsive to disturbances around them. Deprive a jellyfish of this rest, and it behaves sluggishly afterward, in a way that looks remarkably similar to a tired, sleep-deprived person struggling through an exhausted day. This single discovery hints that sleep may not simply be a luxury reserved for complex brains. It might be something considerably older and more fundamental than that, perhaps beginning as a simple way for cells to conserve energy long before anything resembling a proper nervous system ever evolved at all. In jellyfish, sleep gets stripped down to its barest, most essential form, nothing but a repeating cycle of activity and stillness that keeps a simple form of life in balance. There's something quietly humbling in that image. These strange, softly pulsing creatures, drifting through the deep, dark water, maybe showing us the very earliest evolutionary roots of something we still haven't managed to fully understand, even in ourselves. Nobody actually knows, with any real certainty, exactly why we dream. Dreaming might be one of the strangest experiences available to human consciousness, an entire private theater unfolding behind closed eyes, where impossible things happen and somehow still manage to feel completely, convincingly real while they're happening. Its underlying purpose, though, remains genuinely unsettled among researchers. Some theories suggest dreams help consolidate memory, weaving the raw experiences of the day into longer-term, more organized knowledge. Others propose that dreams help regulate emotion, offering the mind a safe, private space to process stress and difficult experiences without the sharper edges those experiences carried while you were awake. Still, other researchers see dreams as something closer to a side effect, essentially random neural firing, stitched afterward into something resembling a story by the brain's relentless, almost stubborn need for narrative structure, its refusal to let raw noise remain simply noise. The honest truth may well be some combination of all of these explanations happening together. What's genuinely remarkable, regardless of the exact mechanism, is just how emotionally powerful, vivid, and strange dreams tend to be, filled with recurring themes of flying, falling, or being chased across landscapes that shift and reshape themselves according to no logic you could ever consciously follow. Dreams tend to leave behind a lingering feeling, an emotional residue, even on mornings when every specific detail has already slipped away completely. Exactly why we dream may never be fully answered. Perhaps that's simply part of what makes dreaming so powerful in the first place. They remain wonderfully untamed, a mystery nested quietly inside an even larger mystery, the secret nightly world tucked inside every single life. There's real, tested science behind at least part of that emotional processing theory. When you dream, you often find yourself revisiting things that made you anxious, joyful, or sad earlier that same day, and researchers increasingly believe this isn't coincidence at all. Dreaming may genuinely be the brain's own method for working through difficult emotions, quietly softening their sharpest edges before they get filed away for good. During sleep, the amygdala, a brain region closely tied to fear and emotional response, becomes remarkably active, even while stress chemicals like norepinephrine drop to some of their lowest levels of the entire day. This particular combination creates something like a safe simulation space, a private environment where your mind can replay difficult experiences without the full, overwhelming intensity those same experiences carried while you were awake and living through them directly. Inside this nightly laboratory, emotions get blended together, gently reshaped, and quietly filed away for storage. It may be part of the reason a good night's sleep can genuinely ease a lingering bad mood, or why grief so often feels considerably sharper on the nights when rest simply won't come. Dreams may never fully erase pain, but they do seem to help transform it into something a little more bearable to carry forward. In that sense, every single dream might function as more than just a story. It might be a quiet, private form of therapy woven directly into the architecture of an ordinary night. Not every dream unfolds in vivid color, either. For some people, dreams appear entirely in shades of gray, almost as though they were being projected on an old black and white television set from decades ago. This particular variation was once considerably more common than it is today. Back in the mid-20th century, when black and white film and television dominated most people's visual media diet, researchers studying dream reports found that a meaningful percentage of people described entirely colorless dreams. In more recent decades, as color imagery has flooded nearly every corner of daily visual life, reports of grayscale dreaming have declined quite dramatically. This pattern suggests something genuinely interesting. Our private dreamscapes may be shaped not purely by biology alone, but also, at least in part, by the surrounding culture and media we grew up immersed in. Even now, a portion of the population continues to dream without color at all, their sleeping worlds rendered entirely in contrast, shadow, and shade rather than hue. Nobody fully understands exactly why. Perhaps the visual centers of the brain are simply wired a little differently in these individuals. Perhaps memory storage strips color away for the sake of efficiency somewhere along the line. Whatever the underlying reason turns out to be, it's a quiet reminder that even inside the deeply private theater of our own dreaming minds, the actual experience of dreaming isn't quite identical from person to person. The longest anyone has ever intentionally stayed awake, under documented conditions, was 11 days. Back in 1964, a high school student named Randy Gardner set out to break a record, staying awake for 11 consecutive days as part of a science experiment, with researchers monitoring him closely throughout. At first, the effects were fairly ordinary. He simply grew tired, the way anyone would. Then his mood began to collapse. His memory started faltering noticeably, and his ability to think clearly nearly vanished altogether. By the final stretch, he was genuinely hallucinating, mistaking ordinary street signs for people, seeing things that simply weren't there at all. And yet, remarkably, after more than 260 hours without any sleep whatsoever, he eventually recovered fully, once he was finally allowed to rest. His record has become something of a legend in sleep science, but it also carries a genuinely haunting undertone, a vivid demonstration of just how fragile the human mind becomes once it's deprived of its single, most basic biological rhythm. Very few people have ever attempted to break that particular record since, not simply because the ordeal itself is so punishing, but because modern science now recognizes that pushing the body this far carries genuine danger, occasionally even fatal danger. 11 days appears to sit right at the outer edge of what's survivable at all. Sleep deprivation, it turns out, can actually be more dangerous than food deprivation. A healthy human body can survive for weeks without any food whatsoever. Without sleep, though, both body and mind begin to genuinely unravel within a matter of days. Laboratory studies have shown that rats deprived entirely of sleep die considerably faster than rats deprived entirely of food. In humans, even comparatively moderate, ordinary sleep loss noticeably disrupts physical coordination, weakens immune defenses, raises blood pressure, and clouds clear judgment. After just 24 hours without sleep, reaction times slow down by roughly as much as if you were legally intoxicated. Push further past that point, and hallucinations begin creeping in at the edges of perception. Your sense of reality itself starts to genuinely warp, and your body begins showing real signs of physiological breakdown. In rare, tragic cases, sleep deprivation can even trigger fatal outcomes directly, as seen in a devastating genetic condition called fatal familial insomnia, in which affected individuals gradually, permanently lose the ability to sleep at all, and eventually die as a direct result of that loss. Food nourishes the body, certainly, but sleep sustains the mind in a way food simply cannot replace. Without adequate sleep, no amount of calories consumed can ever fully compensate for what's missing. It's a need that runs even deeper than ordinary hunger, genuine proof that rest was never merely a luxury layered on top of survival. It is survival in one of its most basic, non-negotiable forms. Your brain quite literally washes itself clean while you sleep. At night, once you settle into deep sleep, something genuinely remarkable begins happening inside your own skull. Narrow channels throughout the brain open considerably wider than they are during waking hours, and cerebrospinal fluid begins washing through the tissue like a slow, deliberate cleansing tide. This entire process, known as the glymphatic system, clears away metabolic waste, accumulated toxins, and stray proteins that build up steadily throughout an ordinary day of thinking. One particular substance swept out during this process is called beta amyloid, a protein closely linked to the development of Alzheimer's disease. Sleep, in this sense, functions almost like a nightly housekeeping shift, quietly preventing dangerous clutter from ever overwhelming the brain's delicate internal environment. During ordinary waking hours, this same cleansing system runs comparatively slowly, almost sluggishly. It's only in the deep quiet of sleep that it truly surges into full, efficient operation. Many researchers now believe this may help explain exactly why sleep feels so genuinely restorative, why the heavy fog of fatigue lifts so noticeably after a proper night's rest. It isn't simply that you feel recharged in some vague, general sense. It's that your brain has been, quite literally, washed clean, polished, and carefully prepared for another full day of thinking. This nightly cleansing carries real, long-term consequences for how the brain ages over time. Brain scans consistently reveal that people who struggle with chronic sleep problems tend to show measurable signs of accelerated brain aging. Cortical thinning, reduced neural connectivity, and impaired white matter integrity all tend to appear earlier in these individuals than in people who sleep consistently well. Cognitive decline, memory difficulties, and slower mental processing frequently follow close behind. The brain, deprived of its nightly reset, seems to age faster than it otherwise would, almost as though extra years were being quietly, invisibly added in the silence. Much of the likely explanation comes down to exactly the repair and cleansing processes we just discussed, the ones that only fully activate during proper, sufficient sleep. Poor sleep appears to leave the brain locked in a more or less constant state of low-grade stress, gradually eroding its natural resilience over months and years. The pattern isn't fixed destiny, though. Improving sleep quality through consistent daily schedules, sufficient darkness, and reduced nighttime noise has been shown to meaningfully slow this kind of decline. The underlying message is genuinely stark if you sit with it directly. How you sleep tonight quietly shapes how your brain will age tomorrow, and every single night carries within it a small, largely unconscious choice, one with real, lasting consequences stretching out over the following years and decades. There's growing evidence, too, that this nightly cleansing offers real, measurable protection to memory and identity themselves. The tragedy of Alzheimer's disease is, at its core, the slow unraveling of memory, but consistent, quality sleep may genuinely help slow that particular unraveling, night after night, dream after dream. In the ordinary quiet of sleep, the brain is, in a very real sense, fighting to preserve the fragile threads that make you specifically, recognizably you. Human sleep follows a repeating rhythm of roughly 90 minutes at a time. Each individual cycle moves from lighter sleep down into deep, slow-wave sleep, then rises back up into REM sleep before the entire pattern begins again from the top. Over the course of an ordinary night, most people move through somewhere between 4 and 6 of these complete cycles. The proportion of each stage shifts noticeably as the night goes on. Deep sleep dominates the earlier cycles closer to bedtime, while REM sleep gradually claims a larger share of each cycle as morning approaches. This 90-minute rhythm turns out to be remarkably consistent from night to night, though its exact length does vary somewhat from person to person. Some researchers suggest that deliberately aligning your waking time with the natural end of a complete cycle, rather than waking abruptly in the middle of one, can genuinely help you feel more refreshed, since being pulled awake in the middle of deep sleep tends to leave people feeling noticeably groggy and disoriented. Whatever specific strategy you use, that underlying 90-minute rhythm functions as a kind of fundamental beat running quietly beneath human biology, a hidden metronome patiently guiding you through the night. Each cycle is really its own small journey, a gradual descent into stillness, followed by a return into the vivid, unpredictable theater of dream. On an average night, most people complete somewhere around 5 full cycles of this kind, 5 separate descents into the depths of slow-wave sleep, and 5 ascents back up into the vivid, active landscape of REM. Each individual cycle carries its own particular character, with dreams tending to grow longer and stranger as morning gets closer, while deep sleep itself gradually recedes the nearer you get to dawn. This pattern helps explain why the final hours before you wake are often the most dream-filled stretch of the entire night, and why cutting a night's sleep short tends to rob you disproportionately of exactly that portion. Together, these 5 cycles build something like a complete architecture for an ordinary night's rest. Deep physical restoration concentrated earlier on, followed by richer emotional and cognitive integration later. To think that your mind silently completes 5 carefully timed loops every single night, moving through work, repair, dreaming, and renewal, is to realize that sleep was never simple, passive rest at all. It's closer to a complex, repeating voyage, quietly undertaken again and again, night after night, for your entire life. Deep sleep, sometimes called slow-wave sleep, is where your body shifts most fully into genuine physical repair mode. During these heavy, unhurried stretches of the night, growth hormone gets released in noticeably higher quantities, actively stimulating tissue repair and muscle growth throughout the body. This is a large part of why serious athletes tend to prioritize long, uninterrupted deep sleep. It's genuinely the specific window of time when their bodies actually recover from intense training. Even if you're not an athlete yourself, your muscles are constantly repairing the countless tiny stresses of ordinary daily movement, and deep sleep remains the primary window when that restoration actually happens. Miss out on enough of it, and your body predictably feels weaker, more fatigued, and considerably less resilient overall. Deep sleep functions almost like a hidden nightly workshop where broken components get quietly repaired, invisible scaffolding gets rebuilt, and physical strength gets steadily renewed, all while you remain completely unaware any of it is happening. Without sufficient deep sleep, physical recovery genuinely stalls, and the body never quite manages to fully reset itself. It's one of the clearest, most concrete reminders available that sleep was never a passive state at all. It's active, ongoing, essential healing, happening quietly behind the scenes every single night of your life. Interestingly, your brain actually uses considerably less energy during deep sleep than it does while you're fully awake. Even though certain repair and memory-related functions surge dramatically during this stage, the brain's overall energy demand still drops noticeably, and many researchers believe this lowered demand may be part of why deep sleep feels so genuinely restorative in the first place, since it gives the brain a real, meaningful break from its otherwise near-ceaseless processing. Slow, rolling brain waves sweep steadily across neural networks during this stage, not unlike a tide gently pulling back from a busy shoreline. This isn't a total shutdown by any means, but rather a deliberate, controlled slowing, conserving valuable energy while still tending carefully to essential maintenance tasks in the background. Remarkably, the brain actually uses nearly as much total energy during REM sleep as it does during ordinary wakefulness, but during deep sleep specifically, it settles into something closer to a genuine low-power mode. That steady balance between high activity and deep rest cycles through the entire night, almost like the brain quietly rocking itself back and forth between focused work and genuine recovery. Each stretch of deep sleep becomes its own small pocket of silence, a brief window where the mind, at long last, finally sets its tools down. When you study a new subject, practice a musical instrument, or pick up any entirely new skill, sleep quietly becomes the hidden force that locks those fresh experiences firmly into place. During deep sleep specifically, the hippocampus, a small but crucial memory hub tucked deep within the brain, actively replays your recent experiences, gradually transferring them into longer-term storage spread across the cortex. It's almost as though the brain runs a careful, deliberate overnight backup process, quietly ensuring that important information doesn't simply get lost or forgotten. At the very same time, unimportant, irrelevant details get steadily pruned away, clearing valuable room for tomorrow's new learning. Without adequate sleep, memories tend to remain fragile, poorly consolidated, and easily forgotten. With it, they gradually crystallize, becoming a genuine, lasting part of who you actually are. This is precisely why pulling an all-nighter so often backfires badly. The brain simply hasn't had the necessary time yet to properly store whatever you were trying so hard to learn. Every single night of proper sleep functions like a silent, patient tutor, quietly reinforcing the day's lessons and weaving them carefully into the deeper architecture of your own mind. It isn't only that sufficient sleep strengthens memory, either. Losing sleep can actively twist and distort what you actually recall afterward. Sleep-deprived brains genuinely struggle to distinguish clearly between real memories and merely imagined details. You might become considerably more confident about entirely false recollections, feeling absolutely certain something happened when, in fact, it never did at all. Research has shown that even fairly mild sleep loss noticeably increases a person's susceptibility to misremembering, general confusion, and outright suggestibility from other people's accounts. This can carry genuinely serious real-world consequences, from mistaken eyewitness testimony to simple poor decision-making in ordinary daily life. A tired, foggy brain tends to stitch fragments of experience together clumsily. Rather than carefully sorting through what actually happened, it scrambles pieces together instead. In this sense, sleep isn't only about the basic act of remembering. It's specifically about remembering accurately. Without it, the ongoing story of your own life gradually becomes blurred, almost as though it were being written on a page where the ink simply never quite finished drying properly. One of sleep's most important, least appreciated gifts is something called neuroplasticity, your brain's remarkable underlying ability to genuinely change and adapt over time. As you learn new things throughout an ordinary day, the connections between individual neurons get strengthened, but they also tend to become messy, overloaded, and genuinely inefficient in the process. At night, particularly during sleep, the brain carefully prunes away unnecessary connections while simultaneously strengthening others, actively reshaping its own internal wiring for greater clarity and efficiency going forward. This entire process resembles careful, deliberate gardening, trimming back excess growth, nourishing the strongest existing pathways, and creating new routes where genuine understanding can flourish over time. Without adequate sleep, new learning tends to remain tangled and disorganized, like seeds scattered carelessly across ground but never properly rooted in place. With sufficient sleep, though, experiences sink in considerably deeper, gradually forming genuine, lasting knowledge. This nightly rewiring process also makes the brain measurably more flexible, better equipped to adapt smoothly to whatever challenges tomorrow happens to bring. Sleep, in this sense, was never simply about recovering from yesterday. It's equally about actively preparing for what comes next, quietly sculpting the brain and steadily turning fleeting daily experience into the lasting architecture of thought itself. It might sound strange at first, but the amount of sleep you get has a direct, measurable effect on exactly how hungry you feel throughout the following day. Sleep helps regulate two key hormones, ghrelin and leptin, which together signal hunger and fullness to your brain. When you don't get sufficient rest, ghrelin levels tend to rise noticeably, actively telling your body it's time to eat, while leptin levels fall at the same time, failing to properly signal that you've actually had enough. The combined result is stronger, more persistent cravings, often specifically for calorie-dense foods your body wouldn't normally reach for. This makes a certain kind of evolutionary sense. When the body senses it's depleted in one way, it instinctively seeks additional energy from somewhere else. But in modern daily life, chronic sleep deprivation frequently leads instead to overeating and unwanted weight gain. It genuinely isn't simply a matter of willpower in these cases. It's straightforward biology at work. When you sleep sufficiently, you reset the delicate underlying balance of appetite, giving your body a proper chance to regulate itself the way it's meant to. A good night's sleep, in this particular sense, isn't only refreshing in some general way. It's also one of the simplest, most effective tools available for maintaining a genuinely healthy rhythm of hunger and satisfaction. That connection between sleep and appetite runs even deeper still. Research has shown that when people are deprived of sleep, they don't simply end up eating more food in general. They specifically crave high sugar, high-fat foods above almost everything else. Brain imaging studies reveal that tired brains show noticeably heightened activity in their reward centers, specifically when shown images of cookies, chips, or pizza, while the frontal regions responsible for careful, rational decision-making grow measurably more sluggish at exactly the same time. This particular combination, stronger cravings paired with weaker self-restraint, makes resisting unhealthy food genuinely more difficult after a poor night's sleep. The effect is powerful enough that some researchers have argued sleep deprivation may function as a hidden, largely overlooked driver behind broader patterns of weight gain across entire populations. When you're genuinely tired, your body isn't simply asking politely for more rest. In a very real sense, it's actively tricking you into chasing quick, easy calories instead. Sleep, viewed this way, isn't only medicine for the mind. It also functions as a kind of shield, protecting against cravings your body simply cannot properly regulate on its own without adequate rest behind it. Sleep also strengthens your immune system directly, night after night, in ways that genuinely matter for your health. During deep, restorative sleep, your immune system actively releases cytokines, specialized proteins that help fight off infection and reduce harmful inflammation throughout the body. Sleep also meaningfully improves the efficiency of T cells, the specific white blood cells responsible for actively seeking out and destroying viral invaders. People who consistently get enough quality sleep are measurably less likely to catch common colds, seasonal flu, and various other infections. Even vaccines tend to work more effectively in well-rested individuals, since the body's immune memory appears to form considerably more strongly when sufficient sleep is present around the time of vaccination. This particular link is strong enough that even just a few consecutive nights of genuinely poor sleep can leave you noticeably more vulnerable to ordinary viruses circulating around you. Sleep isn't only recovery for the mind in this sense. It functions as active reinforcement for the body as well, a shield quietly rebuilt each night against the countless unseen threats constantly present in the wider world. Without it, your natural defenses gradually falter, and even relatively minor germs can end up bringing you down considerably harder than they otherwise would. With it, your body stands properly guarded, genuinely restored, and fully ready to meet whatever the coming day happens to bring. It's worth mentioning, too, that sleep loss tends to affect your mood well before it noticeably affects your actual thinking ability. When you miss out on sleep, the very first thing to genuinely falter usually isn't raw intelligence, but rather emotional regulation. Even a single night of comparatively poor rest can make irritability, stress, and sadness swell noticeably larger than they otherwise would. Brain imaging shows that the amygdala, that same region closely linked to fear and anger we mentioned earlier, becomes measurably hyperactive without adequate sleep, while the prefrontal cortex, the brain's more rational, naturally calming influence, grows correspondingly weaker at the very same time. This particular imbalance leaves people considerably quicker to snap at others, noticeably less patient overall, and generally more likely to overreact to situations that wouldn't normally bother them nearly as much. Interestingly, more purely cognitive abilities, like careful problem-solving and clear reasoning, tend to decline somewhat later, only after mood itself has already begun unraveling. This particular pattern suggests that sleep protects our emotional balance first, before it goes on to safeguard our more purely logical thinking afterward. It helps explain why ordinary tiredness makes the entire world feel noticeably heavier, why arguments suddenly feel sharper, and why everyday frustrations become considerably harder to simply let go of. Sleep isn't only a balm for the body in this sense. It functions as the genuine foundation underlying calm itself. Without it, even the sharpest, most capable mind struggles to keep the ordinary storms of emotion from breaking through more often than they should. Let's pause here together for just a moment. If your thoughts have started drifting a little, that's exactly right. That's exactly what a night like this one is meant to do for you. There's no need to hold on to every detail we've explored so far. The cleansing tides moving through your brain, the quiet, careful work of memory consolidation, the hormones rising and falling in the dark. Just let it all settle over you gently, the way sleep itself settles over a tired body without ever needing to be forced. We still have some distance left to travel tonight, out into the strange and varied sleep habits of other creatures, and eventually, all the way out to the edge of space itself. There's no rush at all. Just stay resting here, and let the rest of the journey carry you the remaining distance. Different creatures have found remarkably different ways to satisfy this same universal need, and few examples are stranger than dolphins. Dolphins live in an environment where constant alertness is essential for basic survival. They must regularly surface to breathe, stay alert to potential predators, and remain attentive to the rest of their pod at all times. To manage all of this while still getting genuine rest, dolphins have evolved a remarkable strategy called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, in which one half of the brain rests deeply while the other half remains fully alert and awake. One eye stays open, while the other closes completely. After a while, the two sides simply switch roles entirely. This clever arrangement means dolphins never fully lose awareness of their surrounding environment, and yet they still manage to receive the genuinely restorative benefits sleep provides. They can continue swimming slowly, surface regularly for air, and remain safe within their watery world the entire time. It's a strange, elegant compromise between constant vigilance and genuine rest, one that shows just how remarkably flexible sleep can actually become when survival demands it. To us, ordinary sleep tends to feel like full surrender. To a dolphin, it functions more like an ongoing negotiation, half dreaming and half awake at the very same time, gracefully straddling the boundary between two entirely different worlds. It sounds almost impossible, but certain birds have genuinely learned to catch sleep while still fully airborne. Frigate birds, which soar continuously over open ocean for days at a stretch, have been directly observed dozing lightly while still gliding steadily through the air. Their brains slip briefly into short bursts of that same unihemispheric sleep dolphins rely on, allowing them to rest without ever losing the control needed to avoid crashing directly into the sea below. During long migrations, these brief airborne naps become genuinely essential, since these birds may travel many thousands of miles without ever finding a truly safe place to land and rest properly. Each individual nap tends to be remarkably short, sometimes lasting only mere seconds at a time, but strung together across a long flight, they provide just enough cumulative rest to survive the entire journey. When researchers directly compared frigate birds resting on land against those still airborne, they found that flying birds got dramatically less total sleep overall, and yet still somehow managed to function perfectly well throughout their journey. It's a genuine reminder that sleep was never quite as rigid a requirement as it might first appear. It can be reshaped considerably by the specific demands of survival. Even far out over the endless open sky, wings still stretched wide and eyes only half closed, rest still somehow finds its own way through. Some migratory birds take this same basic strategy even further, managing to sleep on the wing for days at a time. Species like swifts sometimes travel thousands of uninterrupted miles, soaring continuously over oceans and entire continents without ever really stopping to properly rest. Researchers using tiny, specially designed brain monitors have confirmed that these migratory birds genuinely slip into short bouts of unihemispheric sleep while still gliding steadily forward. One half of the brain effectively shuts down temporarily, while the other half remains fully active, carefully controlling ongoing flight. Occasionally, both halves of the brain dip briefly into rest together, and the bird simply continues coasting forward, carried along gently by the surrounding air currents. Remarkably, some swifts may spend entire months living continuously in open sky, eating, drinking, and sleeping without ever once touching solid ground. For these particular birds, the open sky itself effectively becomes both home and bedroom simultaneously. It stands as one of nature's most elegant available solutions to a genuinely difficult challenge: how exactly to travel across truly enormous distances without ever pausing long enough anywhere to get what most of us would consider real, proper sleep. On the opposite end of the spectrum entirely, despite their towering height and famously calm demeanor, giraffes barely sleep at all. On average, they rest for less than 2 hours out of every full 24, and usually only in short, scattered bursts lasting just a few minutes at a time. This unusual sleep pattern is widely thought to be an evolutionary adaptation to the constant threat of predation. In the wild, giraffes remain genuinely vulnerable to predators, and their unusually long necks and legs make both lying down and standing back up a slow, notably awkward process. Sleeping too deeply for too long could genuinely prove disastrous under those specific conditions. Instead, giraffes snatch small fragments of rest while standing upright, or occasionally curled into strange, brief resting positions on the ground. What's genuinely remarkable is that these tiny microsleeps still seem to provide enough restoration on their own. Giraffes remain healthy and reasonably alert despite sleeping considerably less than almost any other mammal known to science. Their unusual resilience raises genuinely deep questions about what enough sleep actually means as a concept, since it clearly varies far more dramatically across species than most people would assume. For giraffes specifically, the ongoing demands of survival have shaped sleep into something genuinely rare and fleeting, clear proof that nature has found many different ways to carefully balance the competing needs of rest and constant vigilance. If giraffes represent something like the insomniacs of the animal kingdom, cats stand at the complete opposite extreme. Domestic cats typically sleep somewhere between 12 and 16 hours a day, and sometimes considerably more than that. These hours tend to be spread out across numerous individual naps, a behavior pattern clearly inherited from their wild ancestors. Larger wild cats, like lions and tigers, also spend the great majority of each day fully asleep, conserving valuable energy for the short, genuinely intense bursts of activity that define successful hunting. To an ordinary house cat's owner, all those naps might look almost indulgent, but they actually represent a careful survival strategy, refined patiently over millions of years of evolution. Interestingly, cats tend to cycle quite rapidly between light dozing and genuinely deep sleep, their ears still twitching reflexively at every small sound around them. Their bodies remain, in a very real sense, perpetually ready to spring immediately awake the moment it becomes necessary. When a cat stretches, purrs contentedly, and settles back into its next nap, It embodies one of sleep's more fascinating paradoxes directly. Genuinely deep rest, paired somehow with a body that never fully lowers its guard. Watching a cat sleep is a little like watching one of evolution's more elegant compromises play out in real time, a careful, ongoing balance between complete safety and full physical restoration. Among the strangest animals on Earth, the platypus also happens to hold one of the strangest sleep records ever measured. Studies have shown that platypuses spend up to 8 hours a day specifically in REM sleep, the particular stage most closely associated with vivid, active dreaming. More time in that specific stage than humans, cats, or even human newborns typically experience. During this extended time, a platypus's brain remains highly active, its eyes flickering visibly beneath closed lids, its small body occasionally twitching in ways that echo the same restless movement other dreaming animals display. Why exactly would a semi-aquatic, egg-laying mammal need quite so much of this particular kind of sleep? One leading theory suggests it may reflect an older, more primitive survival behavior, the twitching, rehearsal-like movement patterns that occur naturally during rest. In the platypus specifically, this ancient pattern may simply remain considerably more exaggerated than in other mammals, offering researchers a genuine window into an earlier, more primitive version of dreaming itself. By carefully studying platypus sleep, scientists are catching real glimpses of how dreaming may have first developed across mammals generally. In a very real sense, the platypus seems to carry an unusually ancient dream world folded directly into its genes, one that connects even us, in some small way, back to our own distant evolutionary past. Human infants spend an absolutely astonishing proportion of their sleep in the REM stage, sometimes as much as half of their entire total rest. That's a dramatically larger share than adults typically experience, who average closer to only about 20% of total sleep spent in REM. Many scientists believe this abundance plays a genuinely vital role in early brain development. Babies are constantly absorbing an overwhelming flood of new sensations, sights, and sounds, and their rapidly developing brains must quickly build the neural networks required to properly handle all of it. REM sleep may specifically help integrate this constant flood of new information, gradually weaving it into the earliest foundations of memory and learning. The frequent twitching and small movements so often seen in sleeping babies may well be the outward, visible signs of this intense, ongoing brain activity happening beneath the surface. As children continue to grow, the overall proportion of REM sleep gradually decreases, eventually settling into the more familiar adult pattern. But during those earliest years of life, dreaming itself may function as one of the hidden engines driving early development, quietly building the foundations of a mind before that mind has even learned how to properly speak. The very first weeks of any human life tend to be dominated almost entirely by sleep. Newborns typically rest for 16 or 17 hours out of every 24, though rarely in any single long, unbroken stretch. Instead, their sleep comes fragmented into short cycles, often lasting only 2 or 3 hours at a time, closely aligned with their frequent need for feeding. Though genuinely exhausting for new parents managing this pattern, it clearly serves a real developmental purpose. Newborn brains sit at an especially critical stage of ongoing growth, and sleep provides exactly the environment that growth requires. The steady alternation between REM and non-REM sleep appears to help consolidate learning even from these earliest possible experiences, including something as fundamental as beginning to recognize a parent's voice. Over time, sleep gradually becomes more consolidated into longer, steadier stretches. But those chaotic early weeks offer a quiet reminder that human life itself effectively begins in dreams. A newborn spends considerably more time asleep than awake, almost as though the mind needs to first rehearse the basic experience of existing safely within the quiet practice space sleep provides, before it's fully ready to properly face the waking world beyond it. If you've ever wondered why teenagers seem to genuinely struggle with going to bed early, the underlying answer lies directly in biology rather than simple stubbornness. During adolescence, the body's circadian rhythm, the internal clock responsible for regulating sleep timing, naturally shifts noticeably later. Melatonin, the specific hormone responsible for signaling sleepiness, gets released considerably later in the evening during the teenage years than it does in either younger children or fully grown adults. This biological shift makes teenagers genuinely, naturally inclined to stay up later at night and sleeping considerably later the following morning. Unfortunately, modern school schedules frequently force teenagers to wake up well before their bodies are actually ready for it, creating widespread, largely unavoidable sleep deprivation across an entire generation. This particular mismatch can noticeably affect mood, academic performance, and even longer-term physical health. When schools have experimented with shifting their official start times later, researchers have consistently found measurable improvements in student attendance, grades, and overall well-being. For teenagers specifically, the seemingly natural desire to stay up late isn't simple rebellion against reasonable rules. It's genuine underlying biology at work. Their internal clocks are quite literally set differently during this particular stage of life, a completely natural rhythm that unfortunately frequently clashes head-on with the practical demands of the wider world around them. Across many different cultures, napping has long been viewed as both a genuine luxury and, at times, an outright necessity. Modern scientific research now hints that these short periods of daytime rest might also be quietly tied to overall longevity. Studies conducted in Mediterranean countries, where afternoon siestas remain a common, ordinary part of daily life, suggest that people who nap regularly show somewhat lower rates of death from heart disease. The underlying reason may be fairly simple. Naps tend to lower overall stress, reduce blood pressure, and give the entire cardiovascular system some genuinely precious recovery time within an otherwise demanding day. Napping also helps restore mental alertness and balances mood, easing some of the ordinary daily wear and tear the body accumulates. While not every single study agrees completely on the exact mechanism involved, the overall pattern remains genuinely intriguing. A nap isn't simply an indulgent treat. It may represent a small, meaningful investment in both health and long-term survival. There's something quietly appealing in the idea of potentially living longer, not through any additional effort or activity, but through more frequent, willing surrender to simple stillness. In the quiet space of an ordinary nap, the body seems to remember something genuinely essential, that rest itself can be its own particular form of strength. Short naps lasting around 20 minutes are sometimes informally called power naps, and for genuinely good reason. Within that brief window, the brain dips into lighter stages of sleep, refreshing focus and sharpening memory noticeably, without ever descending into the deeper stages that tend to leave you feeling groggy and disoriented upon waking. Research consistently shows that naps of this particular length can meaningfully boost learning, problem-solving ability, and overall alertness. Students who nap briefly after a study session frequently perform measurably better on subsequent memory tests. Even pilots and surgeons, working in genuinely high-pressure environments, often rely on carefully timed short naps to keep their performance consistently sharp throughout demanding shifts. This effect has proven consistent enough that some workplaces have begun experimenting directly with dedicated nap pods, offering employees a real chance to reset mentally in the middle of an otherwise long working day. 20 minutes might not sound like a particularly significant amount of time, but it's often genuinely enough for the brain to catch its breath, almost like a brief pause in the middle of a long, demanding climb. Sleep, it turns out, doesn't always need to be especially long in order to be genuinely powerful. That said, longer naps can sometimes leave you feeling considerably worse than before you started, rather than better. Though naps can generally feel quite refreshing, there's a genuine tipping point involved. Sleep lasting somewhere between 30 and 60 minutes often dips into noticeably deeper stages, where waking back up can feel almost like dragging yourself slowly through thick mud. This particular state, called sleep inertia, occurs because the brain gets caught mid-cycle, with neurons still firing according to slow, restorative rhythms when you're suddenly pulled back to full wakefulness. The result tends to be genuine grogginess, sluggish thinking, and unusually heavy-feeling limbs, an overall sense of having somehow slept too much rather than too little. Over time, habitually long naps may even begin interfering with proper nighttime sleep, gradually shifting your natural circadian rhythm out of its ideal alignment. Long naps certainly aren't always inherently bad, though. In cultures where afternoon siestas remain genuinely common, people naturally tend to balance that daytime rest against correspondingly later bedtimes in the evening. For most people in most circumstances, though, the ideal sweet spot tends to be relatively short, enough to genuinely recharge, but not so long that you sink too deeply into sleep you weren't planning on. The real art of napping, well, isn't only about closing your eyes in the first place. It's equally about knowing precisely when to open them again. In certain monastic traditions, sleep itself has long been treated as a genuine part of spiritual practice. Some Buddhist monks, for example, train themselves to rest while sitting upright in a formal meditation posture, deliberately leaning neither to the left nor the right. This unusual method reduces how deeply the practitioner sinks into ordinary sleep, keeping the mind noticeably closer to a state of wakeful awareness even while resting. Some monks reportedly manage to rest for only a few hours each night, spread carefully across brief intervals, all while still maintaining considerable clarity of thought throughout the following day. To them, sleep was never conceived as pure escape, but rather as a genuine form of discipline, simply another facet of ongoing mindfulness practice. By learning to rest without either fully sprawling out or completely surrendering consciousness, these practitioners embody the broader idea that sleep itself can be deliberately shaped, carefully trained, even approached as a spiritual exercise in its own right. Picture drifting gently off to sleep while still sitting upright, body carefully balanced, mind floating somewhere between active dream and quiet meditation. For most of us, ordinary sleep is simply something that overtakes us involuntarily. For these particular monks, it becomes another deliberate form of practice, a quiet reminder that even rest itself can be approached with genuine mindfulness and intention. History offers a few genuinely fascinating examples of well-known figures who treated sleep with open suspicion, sometimes to their own eventual detriment. Napoleon Bonaparte, the French emperor and celebrated military strategist, reportedly needed astonishingly little sleep to function, often resting for only around 4 hours a night, supplementing that with brief naps only when strictly necessary. He considered sleep something close to a genuine waste of valuable time, once remarking, memorably, that 6 hours suffices for a man, 7 for a woman, and 8 only for a fool. His personal habits clearly reflected his relentless drive, long military campaigns, constant high-stakes decision-making, and a deep, abiding impatience with rest of any kind. Yet history hints strongly at the real toll this exacted over time. Toward the later years of his reign, contemporary accounts increasingly describe him as noticeably erratic and prone to sudden exhaustion. While his considerable brilliance was genuinely undeniable, it's tempting to wonder just how much sharper his clarity of judgment might have remained with somewhat more consistent rest along the way. Leonardo da Vinci, the celebrated Renaissance genius, is rumored to have experimented directly with something called polyphasic sleep, deliberately breaking his total rest into many short naps scattered evenly throughout an entire day rather than one single long stretch at night. The underlying idea was that, instead of one long nightly sleep, he could maintain steady creative energy around the clock by napping for just a handful of minutes at regular intervals. Whether these particular historical stories have been somewhat exaggerated over time remains genuinely uncertain, but the general method, sometimes referred to today as the Huberman schedule, has continued to fascinate modern experimenters curious about its potential. In theory, polyphasic sleep could meaningfully reduce total hours spent resting while still providing sufficient REM and deep sleep, delivered in short, concentrated bursts. In actual practice, though, it tends to prove genuinely grueling, difficult to maintain consistently, and often simply unsustainable over any real length of time. Still, the enduring image of Leonardo quietly sketching inventions between brief naps remains genuinely irresistible. It suggests that sleep, much like art itself, can potentially be bent and reshaped, though generally at real, meaningful cost. For most people, nightly rest isn't simply tradition for tradition's sake, but genuine biological necessity. For Leonardo, perhaps even sleep itself became just another canvas to experiment with. Thomas Edison, the celebrated inventor of the practical light bulb, viewed sleep with a similarly deep suspicion throughout much of his working life. He considered it something close to a genuine obstacle, robbing him of valuable hours that could otherwise be spent productively on invention and discovery. With the arrival of reliable electric light, he sincerely believed humanity could gradually conquer what he saw as the old tyranny of night, extending genuine productivity almost indefinitely into what had once been simple darkness. Ironically, modern historical research shows that Edison himself actually napped quite frequently throughout his working days, sometimes dozing off directly in his workshop chair between bursts of focused effort. These frequent naps likely fueled his creativity considerably, offering small bursts of fresh inspiration scattered between his genuinely long working hours, even as his public disdain for sleep helped shape a broader cultural legacy that still lingers today, one that too often equates long working hours directly with real achievement and normal rest with simple laziness. We understand things somewhat differently now. Sufficient sleep genuinely enhances creativity, problem-solving, and meaningful innovation. Perhaps Edison's own brilliance flourished not despite his sleep habits, but at least partly because of the naps he quietly, almost secretly relied on. He may have publicly called sleep wasteful, but in practical reality, those stolen moments of rest were likely among his most valuable tools all along, silently shaping many of the inventions that went on to change the world. Some people can genuinely learn to control their own dreams, a phenomenon known as lucid dreaming. In a lucid dream, you become fully aware that you're currently dreaming while the dream is still actively unfolding around you. For some individuals, this particular awareness opens up genuinely astonishing creative freedom, flying effortlessly across imagined landscapes, walking directly through solid walls, or deliberately shaping entire dream worlds through conscious intention. Lucid dreaming has been practiced within various spiritual traditions for many centuries, and modern scientific research has since confirmed that it's genuinely real. Brain scans reveal distinctive, unique activity patterns during these particular states, a genuine blend of ordinary sleep and waking consciousness occurring simultaneously. Some people stumble into lucidity entirely by accident now and then, while others deliberately train themselves using specific techniques like consistent dream journaling, regular reality checks throughout the day, and gentle mental reminders practiced before falling asleep each night. For those who genuinely master the skill, the dream world itself becomes something like a private laboratory for creativity, emotional healing, or simply pure wonder and exploration. The underlying idea that our own minds can recognize their own illusions in real time and then deliberately play within them stands as one of the most genuinely extraordinary frontiers within the broader science of sleep. It suggests that even during our very deepest rest, some small part of us may remain capable of, in a sense, waking up. Even people who have never once seen the world with their own eyes may still genuinely experience sight within their dreams. Individuals who lose their vision later in life frequently continue dreaming in visual images for a considerable time after blindness first sets in. But even people born entirely blind from birth report dreams rich with vivid sensory detail nonetheless: sound, touch, smell, and occasionally even flashes of visual imagery, entirely constructed by the brain itself from other available information. These particular dreamscapes may be filled with voices, distinct textures, or complex spatial patterns that feel every bit as vivid and immersive as ordinary sight does for sighted people. This phenomenon suggests that dreaming was never simply a matter of passively replaying whatever sensory input happens to be available. It's genuinely a creative act performed by the brain itself. The mind generates its own internal reality, with or without the specific presence of vision to draw directly from. For someone who has genuinely never witnessed a sunrise or watched autumn leaves change color, dreams may nonetheless hold rich landscapes built carefully from memory, imagination, and pure sensation combined. It's a quiet reminder that the dream world ultimately belongs to the brain itself, not specifically to the eyes. A surprising number of people report dreams that repeat consistently throughout their entire lives. These particular recurring dreams may feature the exact same places, persistent themes, or even nearly identical storylines, appearing again and again across years or even decades. Common recurring examples include being chased relentlessly, feeling completely unprepared for an important exam, or flying steadily through oddly familiar skies. Researchers suggest these particular dreams may reflect genuinely unresolved emotions, ongoing recurring stress, or deeply imprinted memories that simply haven't been fully processed. What's genuinely extraordinary is just how long these patterns can persist, sometimes first appearing during childhood, disappearing entirely for years at a stretch, and then quietly returning again much later during adulthood. For the person experiencing them, these recurring stories can feel almost like private messages, unsolved puzzles, or lingering echoes of something important left genuinely unfinished. Whether or not they hold any specific hidden meaning, or simply reflect broader underlying patterns within the brain, they clearly demonstrate that the dream world isn't purely random after all. It carries its own quiet continuity, a kind of secret ongoing narrative threading steadily through the years, gradually shaping the private inner mythology each of us carries. For centuries, nightmares were widely believed to be literal attacks carried out by supernatural beings. In medieval Europe specifically, They were frequently blamed directly on demons or witches, imagined as sitting heavily on a sleeper's chest, suffocating them slowly while filling their dreams with genuine terror. The word nightmare itself originally referred not to a bad dream at all, but rather to an evil spirit, sometimes called the mare, believed to visit unsuspecting sleepers during the night. These particular beliefs likely originated from real experiences of sleep paralysis, moments when vivid, dreamlike visions genuinely overlap directly with ordinary wakefulness. That distinctive feeling of being pinned firmly down, completely unable to move, naturally gave rise over time to widespread stories involving demons and malevolent spirits. Similar myths appear again and again across entirely different, unconnected cultures around the world, spirits pressing down on sleepers, stealing away their breath, or whispering unsettling things directly into their dreams. Today, we can explain nightmares far more precisely through ordinary brain activity and normal emotional processing. But these older stories still linger quietly, echoing on even now within our everyday language. Even now, when someone wakes suddenly from a genuinely terrifying dream, it can still feel, in the moment, almost like something external had physically pressed itself into the night around them. In sleep paralysis specifically, the body remains locked in atonia, the very same natural paralysis that normally prevents us from physically acting out our dreams, while the conscious mind itself becomes fully, unexpectedly aware and alert. The resulting experience is a genuinely strange state where you're fully awake but completely unable to move, often accompanied by vivid, unsettling hallucinations layered directly on top. People frequently report distinct sensations of pressure directly on their chest, a strong sense of an unseen presence somewhere in the room, or the clear perception of shadowy figures nearby. Cultures across the entire world have historically explained sleep paralysis through visitations by demons, ghosts, or various other spirits. In reality, it represents a genuine collision between active dreaming and full wakefulness occurring simultaneously. Though genuinely frightening in the moment, it's almost always completely harmless, typically lasting anywhere from mere seconds up to a few minutes before the body fully, completely wakes. For those who directly experience it, the ordinary boundary between dream and ordinary reality can feel, for those brief moments, genuinely and unsettlingly thin. Sleep paralysis stands as a clear reminder that dreaming was never quite as neatly, cleanly separated from waking life as we often assume. Sometimes the two genuinely bleed together, blurring the ordinary lines of consciousness in ways that feel deeply strange in the moment, even though they're entirely explainable afterward. One sleepwalking, formerly known as somnambulism, is a genuinely fascinating phenomenon in which people rise from bed and move around while still deeply, fully asleep the entire time. It's most common in children specifically, affecting as many as 1 in 5 at some point during their early years. During an actual episode, the sleeper may wander through the house, talk quietly, or even carry out surprisingly complex actions, all while remaining completely unaware of doing any of it. The underlying cause is generally thought to be linked to natural immaturity in the specific brain systems responsible for regulating sleep and wakefulness. As children continue to grow older, these particular episodes usually diminish considerably on their own. For parents witnessing it firsthand, sleepwalking can feel both genuinely fascinating and, at times, quite alarming. A child moving through the house with open eyes, yet with essentially empty conscious awareness behind them, almost like a quiet ghost wandering through their own familiar home. Though generally harmless in most cases, Genuine safety can become a real concern if the child happens to wander too far from home. Sleepwalking illustrates just how surprisingly porous the ordinary boundaries of sleep can actually become. How the body sometimes slips quietly into physical action even while the conscious mind itself remains fully locked away somewhere inside an ongoing dream. A genuinely rare condition known as sleep-related eating disorder causes some people to prepare and actually eat food while still completely asleep, with little to no memory whatsoever of the episode the following day. These particular episodes may involve simple cooking, raiding the refrigerator for whatever's available, or even eating unusual or outright unsafe food combinations, similar in many ways to ordinary sleepwalking. This particular disorder arises from partial arousal occurring during deep sleep, when the body's motor systems become active without full conscious awareness accompanying them. For those genuinely affected by it, the condition can prove both distressing and physically dangerous, sometimes leading directly to injuries or unwanted weight gain over time. And yet these particular behaviors are typically entirely automatic, driven by underlying neural misfires rather than any genuine, conscious hunger. To the sleeper themselves, it can feel almost as though another version of themselves quietly takes over each night, silently raiding the kitchen while the conscious mind remains completely unaware. Cases like this offer a genuine reminder that sleep isn't always the peaceful, quiet state we generally imagine it to be. Sometimes it becomes genuinely fractured, strange, and unpredictable, blurring the ordinary line between conscious waking habit and deeper dreaming instinct. Sleep talking, sometimes called somniloquy, ranks among the most genuinely common sleep-related behaviors observed across the general population. People may mumble something incoherent, whisper quietly, or even shout out entire full sentences while still completely asleep. It can occur during essentially any stage of sleep, from light dozing all the way through deep sleep, though the actual content tends to differ noticeably depending on the specific stage involved. During deep sleep specifically, spoken words often come out garbled or entirely nonsensical. During lighter stages, though, they can sometimes emerge remarkably clear, occasionally even startlingly so. Most people who talk in their sleep have absolutely no memory of the event afterward, often leaving bed partners genuinely amused, or sometimes simply puzzled by what they overheard. Though generally harmless in nearly all cases, sleep talking reveals just how genuinely active the brain remains throughout the night. Language networks can spark suddenly into motion even while ordinary conscious awareness remains fully offline. In a certain sense, sleep talking resembles quietly eavesdropping on the mind's own unfinished thoughts, small fragments of an inner private world occasionally slipping out into the open air. Though considerably rarer than ordinary sleep talking, some sleepers have genuinely been known to sing while still fully asleep, humming familiar tunes, quietly reciting remembered lyrics, or occasionally breaking into a full, if noticeably drowsy, musical performance. This particular phenomenon emerges from essentially the same underlying process as sleepwalking and sleep talking, language and vocal centers activating unexpectedly in the middle of sleep. Reports range widely, from soft, almost ghostly-sounding melodies, all the way to startlingly loud, sudden bursts of song. Some individuals have even been recorded singing genuinely complex musical pieces while still asleep, though typically in a somewhat broken or distorted form. The specific content often seems to come directly from memory, blending together seamlessly with whatever dream imagery happens to be unfolding at the time. For anyone listening nearby, it can feel genuinely eerie or occasionally quite enchanting, almost like catching a private concert performed by someone who has absolutely no awareness they're performing at all. Singing during sleep underscores just how genuinely creative the mind can remain even when it's fully unbound from any conscious, waking control. Even deep within unconsciousness, it seems, the brain sometimes simply cannot help but make a little music of its own. If you've ever watched a dog fast asleep, paws twitching rhythmically, whiskers flickering, muffled little barks occasionally escaping, you've caught a genuine glimpse into the private dream life of another species entirely. Research has confirmed that dogs do experience genuine sleep, and the small movements you're witnessing are, in fact, real, visible signs of active dreaming taking place. Puppies specifically tend to twitch considerably more than older, fully grown dogs, likely because their brains are still busy wiring themselves together, actively rehearsing basic motor skills even during rest. What exactly do dogs dream about? While we obviously can't simply ask them directly, careful experiments strongly suggest their dreams frequently replay ordinary daily activities, chasing, playing, and sniffing eagerly through the wider world around them. Watching a dog twitch gently in its sleep, you may genuinely be witnessing either a quiet rehearsal for tomorrow's adventures, or perhaps a fading echo of today's. There's something genuinely comforting in realizing that animals seem to share not only our basic biological need for sleep, but also that same underlying mystery of dreaming itself. When a sleeping dog's paws paddle rhythmically mid-dream, they may well be running steadily through entirely private dream meadows that only they will ever get to see. Rats are frequently used in sleep research, and what scientists have consistently discovered through that research is genuinely remarkable. Rats appear to dream directly about their own daily experiences. When a rat runs through an unfamiliar maze while fully awake, its brain forms distinctive, specific firing patterns as it carefully navigates each turn. Later, during subsequent sleep, researchers have recorded nearly identical firing patterns repeating, almost as though the rat were quietly running through that same maze again, purely within its own private dream. Sometimes this replayed sequence unfolds noticeably faster than the original experience, or occasionally even entirely in reverse, suggesting the brain may be simultaneously rehearsing the original experience while also actively reanalyzing it from a different angle. These particular findings offer strong support for the broader idea that sleep genuinely helps consolidate memory and learning directly. In a certain sense, a rat's dream essentially functions as its own private homework, quietly replaying the day's lessons until they finally stick firmly in place. Humans likely do something quite similar during our own sleep, revisiting small fragments of the day, practicing specific skills, or gradually reshaping difficult challenges into some workable dream form. Watching a rat's dreaming brain in action is, in a real sense, like catching a small, humbling glimpse of our own, genuine proof that even within the tiny skull of an ordinary rodent, dreams speak in something very close to the universal language of memory itself. Insomnia stands as one of the most genuinely common sleep disorders, touching the lives of millions of people worldwide. At some point during their lives, as many as 1 in 3 adults will experience real difficulty either falling asleep, staying asleep through the night, or waking up considerably too early and being unable to fall back asleep afterward. For some people, this proves to be entirely temporary, closely tied to a specific period of stress, grief, or general life disruption. For others, though, it gradually becomes chronic, an ongoing nightly struggle that steadily drains both energy and mood over time. The cruel underlying paradox of insomnia is that the harder someone actively tries to force sleep, the more elusive genuine rest tends to become. Anxiety itself feeds directly into this frustrating cycle, making proper rest feel increasingly, almost impossibly out of reach. Available treatments range from structured cognitive behavioral therapy through various relaxation techniques, with medication generally reserved for more cautious, limited use. But insomnia, at its core, offers a genuine reminder that sleep was never simply a switch waiting to be flipped on command. It's closer to an ongoing rhythm that must be gently, patiently coaxed back into place. For those who genuinely suffer through it, the night can feel practically endless. For science more broadly, insomnia remains an active frontier of study, a space where biology, psychology, and environment all quietly collide together in the dark. Across numerous studies, women consistently report experiencing insomnia noticeably more often than men do. Hormonal cycles, pregnancy, and menopause all meaningfully influence sleep patterns over the course of a lifetime, making genuine rest considerably more fragile during certain distinct life stages. Women also tend to be somewhat more prone to anxiety and depression, both conditions tightly linked to disrupted sleep patterns generally. Broader social factors play a real role here too. Ongoing caregiving responsibilities, elevated stress, and various societal expectations frequently cut directly into both the available time and overall quality of rest women actually receive. The combined result is a genuinely striking gender gap in reported sleep complaints. Interestingly, despite reporting insomnia considerably more often, women sometimes show somewhat fewer severe long-term health effects from sleep loss compared to men, hinting at subtle underlying biological differences in resilience between the sexes. Still, the overall burden remains genuinely real either way. Night after night, countless women lie fully awake, caught somewhere between straightforward biology and difficult daily circumstance. This particular gender divide in sleep represents one of science's quieter, less discussed inequalities, a reminder that even something as seemingly universal as ordinary rest gets shaped, in practice, by the surrounding complexities of daily life. Narcolepsy is a genuine disorder that disrupts the brain's normal ability to properly regulate sleep and wakefulness together. People living with narcolepsy may suddenly, unexpectedly fall asleep during ordinary daytime activities, even in the middle of a conversation, a meal, or focused work. These particular sleep attacks tend to be genuinely unpredictable and often entirely uncontrollable once they begin. Narcolepsy is also frequently associated with cataplexy, a sudden, temporary loss of muscle tone typically triggered by strong emotions like laughter or genuine surprise. Underlying this condition is a dysfunction in the brain's regulation of a chemical called hypocretin, which normally helps stabilize ordinary wakefulness throughout the day. For those living with narcolepsy, daily life can feel both genuinely exhausting and deeply uncertain, as the ordinary boundaries between sleep and wakefulness blur together almost constantly, without much warning. Treatments certainly exist to help manage symptoms, though no complete cure has yet been discovered. Narcolepsy offers a genuine reminder that sleep was never simply a passive state we drift into. It's an actively orchestrated process the brain must carefully manage moment to moment. When that particular regulatory system falters, sleep can intrude almost like an unstoppable tide, sweeping directly over the waking world with essentially no warning at all. One of the genuinely strangest features of narcolepsy involves exactly how quickly dreams tend to arrive after falling asleep. In most people, REM sleep typically begins roughly 90 minutes after initially drifting off. But people living with narcolepsy can slip directly into REM within mere minutes, sometimes even transitioning almost immediately straight from full wakefulness. This means dreams can genuinely overlap directly with waking life, producing hallucinations vivid enough to feel entirely, convincingly real in the moment. Someone experiencing narcolepsy might close their eyes and find themselves immediately transported into a full dreamscape, all while remaining half aware, somewhere in the background, of the real world still surrounding them. These particular experiences can prove genuinely disorienting, even frightening at times. They blur the usual distinction between reality and pure imagination, between wakefulness and sleep, in ways most people never have to directly confront. Yet they also offer genuinely unique scientific insight into just how fragile those particular boundaries actually are for everyone. Narcolepsy demonstrates that dreams are never really all that far away in the first place. They hover constantly at the very edges of ordinary consciousness, ready to flood back in at almost any moment. For most of us, that particular barrier remains quite strong and reliable. For those living with narcolepsy, it can feel genuinely paper-thin by comparison. Normally, sleep paralyzes the body completely, preventing us from physically acting out whatever we happen to be dreaming about at the time. But in a genuine condition called REM sleep behavior disorder, this crucial natural safeguard fails to properly engage. Dreamers affected by this disorder may shout out loud, throw punches, kick forcefully, or even leap suddenly out of bed entirely, physically acting out whatever scene happens to be unfolding within their mind at that exact moment. Sometimes these particular movements become genuinely violent or physically dangerous, occasionally leading directly to real injuries for the person themselves or anyone sleeping nearby. The disorder itself remains genuinely rare, but scientifically fascinating precisely because it demonstrates just how vivid and immersive dreaming can actually become. Those who experience it often recall specific dreams involving being chased or actively fighting, their bodies quite literally echoing that same imagined struggle in real, physical space. Interestingly, REM sleep behavior disorder has also been closely linked to certain neurological diseases, including Parkinson's disease, sometimes appearing clearly years before any of the disease's other, more typical symptoms become apparent. This particular connection makes the disorder a genuinely valuable early warning sign for doctors treating at-risk patients. For the affected dreamer themselves, though, it represents a nightly collision between two entirely separate worlds, a vivid dream quite literally bleeding directly into physical reality, with the body simply unable to remain properly still throughout. Sleep apnea is a genuine condition in which normal breathing repeatedly stops and starts throughout the night, frequently without the sleeper ever consciously realizing it's happening at all. In obstructive sleep apnea specifically, the airway either partially collapses or becomes fully blocked, causing breathing pauses that can last anywhere from a few brief seconds up to several full minutes at a time. The brain typically responds by briefly waking the body just enough to properly restart breathing again, sometimes repeating this pattern literally hundreds of separate times over the course of a single night. These frequent micro-awakenings genuinely shatter the natural continuity of proper rest, leaving people feeling exhausted the next day despite having technically spent many hours lying in bed. Severe, untreated cases have been closely linked to heart disease, stroke, and persistently high blood pressure, as this repeated nightly stress steadily strains the entire cardiovascular system over time. Treatments like CPAP machines work by keeping the airway properly open throughout the night, effectively restoring more normal, continuous sleep for those affected. For people genuinely struggling with this condition, proper diagnosis and treatment can prove genuinely life-changing. Sleep apnea reveals just how surprisingly fragile ordinary rest can actually become. Something as basic and automatic as simple breathing, taken completely for granted throughout waking hours, can become genuinely precarious once sleep sets in. It's a clear reminder that even our most fundamental biological rhythms require real, ongoing care. Snoring ranks among the most common of all nighttime sleep disturbances, both for the person doing the snoring and for anyone else sharing the same room. Caused primarily by vibrations occurring in the airway as surrounding tissues gradually relax, snoring can become surprisingly loud in more extreme cases, sometimes reaching volumes exceeding 80 decibels, comparable to the steady noise of busy city traffic or a running vacuum cleaner. While occasional, mild snoring is generally harmless on its own, chronic, persistent snoring can sometimes signal an underlying condition like sleep apnea that genuinely deserves closer medical attention. For bed partners specifically, loud snoring can prove disruptive enough to require earplugs, separate sleeping arrangements, or various medical interventions. The often light-hearted humor surrounding snoring tends to mask just how genuinely serious it can sometimes be underneath. In certain extreme cases, snoring becomes loud enough to noticeably rattle nearby walls or startle sleeping household pets. It's a strange, quiet paradox worth sitting with, that something as fundamentally quiet as ordinary rest can occasionally transform into something so genuinely, surprisingly noisy. Even simple silence itself, it turns out, is never entirely guaranteed within the wider landscape of an ordinary night. Snoring, remarkably, isn't unique to humans at all. Elephants, with their genuinely massive airways, are also known to snore quite noticeably while sleeping. Recordings captured in wildlife sanctuaries and zoos have documented deep, rumbling snores echoing steadily from these enormous animals as they rest lying down. Elephants themselves sleep for only a few hours out of each day, but when they finally do settle into rest, their snoring can resonate almost like distant rolling thunder. Observers frequently describe the sound as both strangely endearing and genuinely surreal. The largest land animals on Earth breathing so heavily during sleep that they almost seem to gently shake the surrounding ground. Snoring in elephants likely serves no particular biological purpose beyond simply being a natural byproduct of deeply relaxed muscles, but it quietly connects us across an enormous range of different species. From humans to dogs, cats, and even elephants, the same noisy vibrations of ordinary rest remind us that sleep genuinely is universal. Even the most majestic, imposing creatures on the planet aren't exempt from the small, humble quirks of relaxation. When an elephant finally drifts off to sleep, the surrounding landscape itself might quite literally hear its slumber, echoing softly out across the surrounding night. The body's circadian rhythm is guided almost entirely by light, and genuine darkness at night plays a crucial role in keeping that internal clock properly aligned. Darkness specifically triggers the steady release of melatonin, the particular hormone responsible for signaling that it's genuinely time to feel sleepy. Even fairly small amounts of artificial light, from street lamps outside, glowing phone screens, or a softly lit alarm clock nearby, can interfere meaningfully with this process, reducing melatonin production and disrupting proper rest as a direct result. Over time, ongoing exposure to light pollution has been linked to increased insomnia, mood disorders, and various metabolic problems as well. This is precisely why sleep experts frequently recommend blackout curtains, dimming electronic devices well before bedtime, and keeping bedrooms as genuinely dark as reasonably possible. In real darkness, the body seems to remember its own natural, ancient rhythm, settling comfortably back into cycles of night and day that stretch back long before electric light ever existed. Sleep in the modern world is constantly, quietly invaded by artificial light, but genuine restoration still lies primarily in darkness. To step deliberately into shadow each night isn't merely closing your eyes. It's aligning yourself once again with the wider rhythm of the planet itself. Blue light specifically, the kind emitted heavily by phones, tablets, and most modern screens, proves particularly powerful at delaying sleep onset. It suppresses melatonin production noticeably, tricks the brain into believing it's still somehow daytime, and shifts the entire circadian rhythm meaningfully later than it should naturally sit. This combination makes falling asleep considerably harder, shortens total available rest, and generally lowers overall sleep quality across the board. Even fairly dim light left on in the bedroom can fragment sleep noticeably, leading to more frequent awakenings throughout the night. Studies have consistently shown that people regularly exposed to artificial light at night report meaningfully higher rates of both insomnia and general daytime fatigue. In purely evolutionary terms, our bodies were originally designed around firelight, moonlight, and scattered starlight, not glowing rectangular screens held mere inches from our faces each evening. This ongoing clash between ancient biology and modern technology represents one of the genuinely significant sleep challenges of our current era. To rest properly and well, it helps to remember that light itself was never neutral in the first place. It functions as a genuine signal, an active message sent directly to the brain. At night specifically, that particular message should ideally be silence, shadow, and a gentle, ongoing invitation toward dreaming. In the Arctic and Antarctic regions, the seasons bring genuinely extreme conditions. Months of completely unbroken sunlight, followed eventually by months of near-total darkness. And yet people living in these regions still manage to adapt, finding practical ways to regulate sleep despite the near-total absence of ordinary natural light cycles to guide them. During the long summer months, blackout curtains and carefully maintained artificial routines become genuinely essential tools for reliably signaling nighttime to the body. During the long, dark winter, specialized lamps designed to mimic natural daylight help residents maintain alertness throughout otherwise sunless days. Remarkably, residents of these regions still manage to anchor their circadian rhythms reasonably well, though certainly not without real, ongoing difficulty along the way. Many report noticeable shifts in mood, energy levels, and overall sleep patterns closely tied to whatever the sky above happens to be doing at any given time of year. These particular adaptations demonstrate just how genuinely flexible the human body can actually become, bending to accommodate conditions far more extreme than most of us will ever personally encounter. For people living at the poles, sleep isn't simply a matter of straightforward biology anymore. It becomes something closer to a cultural practice, carefully shaped by available tools, long-standing local traditions, and community support. It stands as real, lived proof that even when the sun itself effectively disappears for months at a stretch, human beings still find reliable ways to dream. When you travel rapidly across several time zones, your internal circadian rhythm inevitably lags behind the new local environment you've just arrived in. Jet lag is essentially the resulting mismatch between your body's own internal clock and the actual light and darkness cycle of wherever you happen to currently be. Common symptoms include noticeable fatigue, temporary insomnia, irritability, and sometimes even mild digestive disruption. At its core, jet lag simply represents the body struggling to properly recalibrate itself to an entirely new cycle of light and darkness. For every individual time zone crossed during travel, it typically takes roughly a full day for the body to completely readjust, and catch up. Deliberate exposure to natural morning sunlight tends to help reset the internal clock considerably faster. Just as carefully avoiding bright light at inconvenient times can help minimize additional disruption. For astronauts living aboard the International Space Station, this same basic challenge becomes considerably stranger still, since the station experiences a full 16 separate sunrises and sunsets within every single 24-hour period. Carefully managing light exposure becomes genuinely essential for their long-term well-being under these unusual conditions. Jet lag, in its own way, offers a clear reminder of just how deeply light continues to govern sleep, and how genuinely fragile that underlying balance remains. Even as modern air travel continues, shrinking the entire globe, our bodies still remain firmly tied to considerably more ancient rhythms of sun and shadow. In the genuinely strange environment of space, sleep takes on an almost surreal new quality entirely. Without ordinary gravity present, astronauts obviously cannot simply lie down in any conventional sense. There's no meaningful down to lie toward in the first place. Instead, they sleep inside small, cocoon-like sleeping bags, carefully strapped directly to the interior walls of their spacecraft. Once properly secured inside, they float in complete weightlessness, their bodies fully supported everywhere at once, entirely free from the usual pressure points ordinary gravity creates against a mattress. This might sound genuinely restful in theory, but astronauts consistently report that sleeping in space actually proves surprisingly difficult in practice. Constant background noise from various onboard machinery, unusual light cycles, and the fundamentally disorienting lack of gravity all combine to disrupt normal circadian rhythms considerably. Dreams reported in space often take on a genuinely strange quality of their own, clearly shaped by the surrounding environment of persistent weightlessness. And yet proper rest remains genuinely essential regardless, since accumulated fatigue can meaningfully compromise critical, safety-sensitive mission tasks. To drift gently inside a sleeping bag tethered securely to the wall of a station currently orbiting the entire Earth is to experience sleep in perhaps its most genuinely alien form imaginable. Even out among the stars, the body still insists on its own nightly ritual, a quiet reminder that no matter how far we travel, sleep itself always comes along for the journey. On Earth, ordinary gravity helps naturally anchor the rhythms of sleep. Our bodies sink comfortably into a mattress, that familiar sense of weight pulling us gently downward, functioning as a subtle, ongoing signal of genuine stillness. But in space, there's no meaningful down at all to sink toward. Astronauts float continuously in weightlessness, their internal clocks genuinely confused by that rapid, repeating succession of 16 separate sunrises and sunsets occurring every single day aboard the International Space Station. Sleep itself tends to become noticeably shallower, more fragmented, and considerably more fragile under these unusual conditions. Constant background noise from ongoing life support systems hums steadily throughout the station, and temperature can swing fairly dramatically as well. Even properly secured inside sleeping bags strapped to the wall, astronauts frequently report real difficulty reaching genuinely deep sleep. Studies have shown they average measurably less total rest than they typically would back on Earth, with their REM cycles often noticeably shorter as well. The cumulative result tends to be persistent fatigue, a background challenge that must be carefully, deliberately managed to avoid potentially serious mistakes during demanding mission work. Space effectively strips sleep down to its barest essentials, offering a genuine reminder of just how deeply our ordinary rest actually depends on gravity, darkness, and simple quiet. Even among the distant stars, it turns out, sleep itself becomes something genuinely alien, reshaped entirely by an environment our bodies never evolved to properly navigate in the first place. A genuinely rare group of individuals, sometimes called natural short sleepers, appear to thrive on only about 4 to 6 hours of sleep each night, without showing any obvious negative effects from it. Unlike most people, who would quickly begin to genuinely struggle under such a limited schedule, these particular individuals seem to be genetically wired for a kind of unusual sleep efficiency. Researchers have identified specific mutations in certain genes, including December 2nd and ADRB1, that appear to directly alter how the brain regulates its own underlying need for sleep. Natural short sleepers tend to wake up feeling genuinely refreshed, alert, and energetic, on a schedule that would leave most other people feeling thoroughly wrecked. Their genuine rarity makes them scientifically fascinating, living proof that the basic biological need for sleep isn't perfectly identical across all of humanity. And yet, even for these particular individuals, rest still remains genuinely essential. It's simply compressed into a considerably shorter window than most people require. They offer a quiet reminder that biology can meaningfully bend certain rules, but it rarely, if ever, breaks them entirely. For the overwhelming majority of us, deliberately chasing this same pattern would only lead to genuine exhaustion. For this small, fortunate group, it's simply, naturally, how they happen to be built. What's perhaps most remarkable about genuine short sleepers isn't really their unusual ability to function well on minimal rest, but rather how thoroughly ordinary they otherwise seem to be in every other respect. They hold down demanding jobs, raise families, and pursue hobbies without any apparent additional strain. Many describe simply having extra hours available within their day, a kind of quiet, hidden gift of additional time. Some channel that extra time directly into creativity, continued learning, or general productivity. Others simply enjoy having more waking hours to live their lives. Despite their genuinely unusual sleep pattern, they show no consistent signs of poorer overall health or any measurably shortened lifespan. In fact, some preliminary studies even hint that they may age somewhat more gracefully than average, though this particular research remains genuinely ongoing. It's important to note that this isn't remotely the same thing as chronic sleep deprivation, which reliably harms nearly everyone who experiences it. True short sleepers simply don't fight against underlying fatigue the way most people would. They genuinely don't feel it in the first place. Their existence demonstrates the remarkable underlying diversity of human biology, and how even something as seemingly universal as sleep can occasionally bend into rare, genuinely extraordinary forms. While sleep remains genuinely essential for health, getting considerably too much of it may also carry real, measurable risks of its own. Studies have shown that people who regularly sleep more than 9 or 10 hours each night tend to show somewhat higher rates of certain health issues, including cardiovascular disease, depression, and various metabolic problems. The underlying reasons remain genuinely debated among researchers. Extended sleep may frequently be more of a symptom of some underlying illness rather than a direct cause of new health problems. But it clearly demonstrates that genuine balance matters considerably either way. Sleep is certainly restorative in reasonable amounts, but excess sleep may signal a deeper imbalance somewhere within the body. The genuinely healthiest range for most adults tends to fall somewhere between 7 and 9 hours nightly, enough to properly sustain the body without tipping over into meaningful excess. Occasional oversleeping is generally harmless, simply a natural response to accumulated fatigue. But when it becomes a chronic, ongoing pattern, It may well be the body quietly signaling underlying trouble worth paying attention to. Sleep, in this particular sense, behaves a little like water, essential in the right amount, but genuinely capable of causing harm in true excess. Real health tends to lie somewhere in a comfortable rhythm, generally found along the sensible middle path of nightly balance. Cultural attitudes towards sleep vary considerably, sometimes almost contradicting each other outright. In many societies, particularly those heavily shaped by industrial-era work schedules, extended sleep has long carried a certain stigma, frequently associated with simple idleness. Traditional proverbs often warn directly against oversleeping, effectively equating it with a wasted life. Cultural figures widely celebrated as successful often boast openly of needing very little sleep, tying genuine achievement directly to relentless waking effort instead. The common image of someone still lying in bed well into the late morning is frequently associated with laziness rather than genuine health. Yet these particular attitudes ultimately reflect cultural values more than they reflect underlying biology. Extended sleep is sometimes genuinely necessary for growing children, for adolescents, for those recovering from illness, or for anyone dealing with real physical or emotional strain. To simply dismiss this as laziness ignores its real, underlying biological purpose. Still, that particular stigma persists in many places, quietly shaping how people come to perceive their own personal needs. Society's broader judgment of sleep reveals just how often it tends to resist genuine rest altogether, consistently exalting visible productivity over quieter, less visible balance. To genuinely honor extended sleep, when it's truly needed, is to gently challenge that particular assumption, remembering that rest was never really weakness in disguise. It functions, instead, as genuine resilience. Elsewhere, in different cultural contexts entirely, extended sleep is celebrated openly as a genuine luxury rather than something to feel ashamed of. In aristocratic households across past centuries, sleeping comfortably late into the morning was widely seen as a clear, visible sign of real wealth, the simple ability to rest fully while others were already hard at work elsewhere. Today, in certain modern contexts, genuinely indulgent sleep gets framed as a well-earned treat, something reserved primarily for weekends or vacation time. Hotels now actively advertise dedicated sleep retreats and carefully curated pillow menus, deliberately framing rest itself as a form of genuine pampering. In this particular cultural framing, sleep isn't laziness at all, but rather a genuine reward, a deliberate gift one gives freely to oneself. And yet treating sleep purely as luxury does risk quietly forgetting that it remains, underneath everything else, a genuine biological necessity as well. Sleep was never meant only for the fortunate few. It's meant for absolutely everyone, every single night, regardless of circumstance. Still, there's genuine beauty tucked inside this particular cultural framing too. Viewing extended sleep as pleasure, almost as a kind of quiet feast, restores real dignity to the simple act of resting. It gently reminds us that slowing down can genuinely be its own form of indulgence, and that real luxury sometimes lies not in acquiring more, but simply in sleeping deeply, freely, and entirely without guilt. Once widely stigmatized as simple laziness, napping is steadily finding genuine new respect within modern workplaces around the world. Companies increasingly install dedicated nap pods, designated quiet rooms, or broader wellness programs specifically designed to encourage brief rest during the working day. Research consistently supports this particular cultural shift. Naps have been shown to genuinely improve productivity, creativity, and overall workplace safety. Pilots, surgeons, and emergency responders have long relied on carefully timed naps to stay properly sharp during demanding shifts. Now, ordinary office workers, programmers, and company executives are increasingly adopting similar habits as well. In Japan, a practice called inamuri, essentially dozing briefly at work, has actually been culturally accepted for many decades already, generally viewed there as a genuine sign of dedication rather than laziness. In many Western countries, broader attitudes are gradually catching up to this same idea, increasingly reframing naps as legitimate tools for improved performance rather than embarrassing lapses. What was once kept largely secret or treated as something shameful is steadily becoming normalized, and in some workplaces, even openly celebrated. The modern workplace nap isn't really an act of rebellion against productivity culture. It's simply thoughtful adaptation, a quiet acknowledgement that basic human biology ultimately cannot be indefinitely ignored or overridden. Somewhere in the hum of an ordinary office, behind glass walls and closed doors, the modern siesta is quietly making its steady return, genuine proof that even deep within our increasingly digital age, sleep still, ultimately, tends to win. Our sleeping brains, remarkably, are never entirely sealed off from the outside world around us. External sounds can genuinely slip directly into an unfolding dream, quietly reshaping its landscape as it continues. A ringing phone somewhere nearby might transform seamlessly into a church bell within a dream. The gentle patter of falling rain outside might merge naturally into an entire story about walking steadily through some distant storm. Researchers have actually studied this particular phenomenon directly in experiments known as targeted memory reactivation, deliberately playing subtle sounds closely linked to specific tasks learned earlier during the day. When the sleeping brain hears these particular sounds again during sleep, it often appears to strengthen those associated memories further, almost as though quietly rehearsing them more deeply in the background. Beyond formal scientific study, many people have naturally experienced something similar on their own, an alarm clock gradually morphing into part of an unfolding dream scenario, or a partner's voice somehow entering directly into ongoing dream dialogue. It demonstrates that dreaming was never a fully sealed, private experience after all. It stays genuinely porous, quietly open to outside influence, blending your own inner imagination together with whatever's actually happening in the surrounding physical world. Sleep, in this particular sense, isn't complete separation from reality. It functions more like an ongoing, quiet conversation. Even deep within a dream, it seems, the waking world still finds its own small ways to gently whisper in. Most people forget the specific details of their dreams within just a few minutes of waking up each morning. But keeping a dedicated dream journal, writing down even small fragments the moment you first wake, has been shown to considerably improve overall dream recall over time. The simple act of recording a dream appears to signal to the brain that dreams genuinely matter, gradually strengthening the underlying memory pathways involved in retaining them. Over time, with consistent practice, dreams tend to become noticeably clearer, richer, and more detailed than before. A journal kept faithfully over weeks or months can reveal recurring themes, familiar characters, or specific recurring places, gradually turning what once felt like pure dream chaos into something closer to an organized, personal map of the subconscious mind. Some lucid dreamers use journaling as a genuine foundation for their broader practice, deliberately training their awareness by carefully studying their own recurring dream patterns over time. Others simply enjoy the quiet pleasure of rediscovering the vivid, strange landscapes their own mind creates each night. The discipline itself gradually transforms fleeting, half-remembered whispers into something closer to a genuine personal mythology, an ongoing nightly storybook quietly written by the brain for an audience of one. Many people sincerely believe that a long weekend of extra sleep can fully erase the accumulated debt of several previous sleepless nights. But careful research shows that lost sleep is genuinely never fully, completely recovered afterward. While additional rest can certainly ease some of the resulting mental fog, certain specific deficits, particularly memory consolidation and proper immune repair, simply cannot be fully made up once they've already been missed entirely. The body doesn't appear able to store sleep away for later use the way it might store other resources. Instead, it operates largely on tight daily cycles that need to be genuinely renewed fresh each and every night. Chronic sleep debt tends to build up gradually and subtly, quietly eroding attention, mood, and overall health over time, even when we personally feel like we're managing to cope reasonably well in the moment. It behaves a little like skipping meals. Eating twice as much again tomorrow doesn't genuinely undo today's earlier hunger. The only truly reliable cure for accumulated sleep loss appears to be simple consistency, giving both body and mind steady, genuinely reliable rest, night after night, rather than occasional catch-up. A single indulgently long night of sleep may certainly feel wonderful in the moment, but it can never fully replace the countless small repairs that should have quietly happened each evening, one at a time, all along the way. Sleep, for all our careful research, remains genuinely one of science's greatest unsolved mysteries. For everything we've come to understand about it, sleep still isn't fully, completely explained. Why must consciousness genuinely fade away each and every night? Why must every animal willingly risk real vulnerability simply to properly rest? We know sleep restores, heals, and carefully processes, and yet no single theory manages to fully capture its complete essence. It's almost as though sleep itself is simply too vast, too genuinely ancient, to ever be fully pinned down by any one explanation. The mystery endures not from any lack of scientific effort, but from sheer, genuine depth. Sleep likely serves many different purposes all at once, intertwined together: memory, emotion, physical repair, creativity, and basic survival. Perhaps it genuinely cannot be reduced to just one single, tidy explanation after all. These unanswered questions, in a strange way, make sleep feel even more profound rather than less. Every single night, you surrender willingly to something science still cannot completely map. Sleep remains a genuine frontier, a puzzle hiding quietly in plain sight, experienced fully by everyone, and yet fully understood by no one at all. It's genuinely humbling to realize that the simplest possible act, closing your own eyes at the end of a long day, still holds so many quiet secrets. Sleep was never only a necessity. It is, in its own patient way, still genuinely wonder itself. And so we arrive, gently, at the end of tonight's journey through the quiet science of sleep. From the strange, drifting patterns of jellyfish resting in the sea, to dreams that have quietly inspired symphonies and stories throughout history, to the mysteries that continue to genuinely puzzle scientists even now, we've wandered together tonight through the many landscapes of night. What we've learned tonight is, in the end, simple and yet genuinely profound. Sleep was never an absence, never truly wasted time. It's a complete world entirely unto itself, a nightly voyage where the body quietly repairs, the mind steadily renews, and the heart eventually finds its own rhythm again. It's every bit as universal as ordinary breathing, and yet it still carries secrets we can't quite fully name, even now. Think, for a moment, of the countless other beings sleeping somewhere right now. Tonight, dogs twitching gently through dreams of open fields, dolphins resting one careful half of their brain at a time, astronauts tethered quietly inside their own floating cocoons far above the earth. Sleep is the common, quiet thread connecting all of us together, from the very smallest creature to the very largest, stretching from the ancient past all the way into whatever distant future still waits ahead. Each night, we return to it, whether we consciously choose to or not, simply because it is, in every real sense, home. And as you continue listening now, you might already feel yourself gently slowing down, your own heartbeat gradually softening, your breathing steadily deepening, your thoughts drifting gently now, like leaves quietly carried along on calm water. Perhaps you can feel the edges of your own mind beginning to soften too, the same way an ordinary day quietly dissolves once night finally, fully takes hold. There's genuinely no need to hold on to any of these facts or stories any longer. You can simply let them scatter now, like stars slowly spreading across a dark night sky, while your body settles naturally into the rhythm it has always known how to find on its own. Sleep will take exactly what it needs tonight. A few specific memories, perhaps some small fragments of today, maybe even a dream or two waiting quietly on the other side. And everything else can simply, gently fall away. Here's the mirror I want to leave you with tonight. Somewhere out there, right now, countless other minds are doing exactly what yours is quietly doing at this very moment, slowing down, softening, letting the noise of an entire day finally settle into stillness. You are not alone in this nightly surrender, even though it always, somehow, feels entirely private and your own. Every creature that has ever closed its eyes to rest, every human being who has ever lain quietly in the dark waiting for sleep to finally arrive, has shared this exact same experience with you, across every era, every culture, every single night since consciousness itself first learned how to rest. Sleep asks nothing of you except your willingness to simply let go for a while. And in exchange, it quietly gives you back to yourself, restored, a little more each morning, ready to begin again.